Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Purple Noon, a podcast. Did you miss us? We're back for the 18th time this year. I am Stephanie Conti, and I am here with my best friend, the best podcaster in the entire world, the woman who carries this team like no other, Savanna Lanausse.
Woo!
This is like no joke. This is our first sit down podcast. Like we're not seeing each other. This is just an audio only, no time limit because I don't want to pay the Zoom monthly fee. It's just us talking now. And I just realized the last time we did this, we talked about the Alain Delon film that gives me so much heartache and whiplash just thinking about it. The prison film, the what's the name of it?
I know, yeah.
Two Men in Town.
Yeah.
So
Back in that one was that November?
Yeah.
Oh gosh.
We needed the break. That was an intense film. I hadn't cried like that for a movie for a while. But we're back. And how does it feel to be back, bestie?
Feels amazing.
Good. So I've kind of been doing I had like a really big deep dive into like video games, I would say, over the past several months. And so now I'm finally going, oh, movies are a thing, because I went heavy into the retro gaming. So now I'm back, at least mentally, into the movie scheme again. You know, sometimes you just need a break. I think also TikTok and sadly as social media sometimes just makes the idea of films just like do you ever feel that way? Like when you're like, ugh, like you watch something and it's someone talking about like criticism about film, and it's not even criticism, it's just weirdness. You know what I mean?
I unfortunately think that our community can be very, very abrasive to different opinions. And we see that, I think, the most on TikTok.
Yeah, I literally, like, my TikTok account is still up, but I felt like just seeing, and it's one thing to have an opinion about a film. Of course, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, but I felt like I was just seeing like creators tear people down for their opinions and just be like, well, I'm better because I like Peaky Blinders, and like that type of stuff, it just, I felt like
I love Peaky Blinders.
I know. But like there's that like one section of like film, like people who are like, I'm trying to think. They're very much like Peaky Blinders, American Psycho, La Haine, and then like another movie that's all about like male angst, which is fine to like those movies, of course. But I just felt like a lot of people who fit in that subgroup kind of tend to be haters and stuff, and they're like, "You're a woman. Good luck watching an Akira Kurosawa film."
Well, it's also like if you don't like those movies, or if you like, I was looking on TikTok and the absolute disgust our community has for romantic comedies or like very feel-good movies is insane. And
Yeah.
I'm just sitting there, I'm like, people are allowed to like, I understand saying like, okay, maybe this isn't the most like emotionally well-written film ever, but people are allowed to like any kind of movie they want.
Yeah, and I've always been the type to be like, oh, I'd rather see an old movie compared to a newer ones, because I personally like just being, I like the accessibility of it. I like the fact that I don't have to pay. Like, I like to know what I'm going to get. You know what I mean? Like, I like seeing stills of a movie, seeing some reviews, and then being able to watch it on like HBO, Criterion Channel, whatever it may be, without any type of, because like when you go to see a movie, and it's like sometimes when you go see a movie in a movie theater, it's great and it's an awesome experience, but when it's bad, it is like you're upset about it for weeks. Like the Midsummer effect. Me and Savanna did not like Midsummer, and I remember us just being so angry for weeks after seeing that film.
It was such a bad theater experience. Like, it was so bad.
And also too, the power did go out midway the theater, but overall, still, like, we were still able to judge the movie, and we weren't fans of it, clearly, because we've ripped on it many a times before.
No, yeah. When you see a movie in theaters and you hate it, it does stick with you. Like I feel like it's a good and a bad thing, but like when you watch something on TV, in my opinion, it's like 10 times more forgettable. I will see a movie
Oh yeah.
from Netflix and not remember I saw it like a week later.
I 100% agree. And I'm not saying that like, oh, the at-home theater experience is superior. No, no, no.
Yeah,
It's just
no.
I tend to just have a preference for just watching at home compared to going out and stuff. But like, yeah, like I feel like there's just so much like negativity. And like, if you are listening to this and you're like, but I really like Midsummer, that's valid. Like, you are totally more than okay to like Midsummer. I don't view you less for liking Midsummer or anything
Yeah.
crazy like that. But when you go, oh, you just didn't get it, but like, no, I understood it just fine. I just didn't like it. You know, that
Yeah.
type of discourse is it's annoying. It's annoying, you know? So I am officially taking a big step back from TikTok. I also just kept getting angry. They kept showing me videos that it's like, this is why your country sucks type things. And I just want to throw my phone against the
What?
wall, you know?
What? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, like, you know, I just get like the most like horrific stories about like our US healthcare system and things like that. And I'm just like, why? And so I stopped with TikTok. I still have a Twitter account, but I am no longer on Twitter as of right
Yeah.
now either. And you know what? Instagram's cool. You can't say a bad thing on Instagram. Instagram will either allow like the weirdest stuff. Like I saw a video and it said horse plinko, and it was a 3D image of a horse falling down a plinko game. But then I'll also see stuff like Hello Kitty and Sanrio and like all the little funny and cutesy stuff, you know? Or I'll see like Turner Classic Movies posting like an old clip or something like it's just so much more enjoyable. At least for me. Do you feel the same way?
I love Instagram. Instagram knows me so well. Um, and it's more than even TikTok. Like everybody talks about the algorithm on TikTok, but I've always felt like Instagram, my For You page is full of my favorite things.
Yeah.
Old Hollywood, Jesus, um, my bestie, you. So anything I like, anything I look up, like even like my books or whatever I have, like it's a very, for me, Instagram has always been like a very positive place because obviously my personal account is private and I feel like that helps a lot too.
Yeah.
But I agree, like I've always preferred Instagram over any other platform just because it is the more positive place for me in general.
Yeah. And you know, like you and I both had a pretty like weird experience with TikTok last year, and I can definitely say that sadly that did sour in a way, and I know I shouldn't have let it, but it did sour for a brief moment my relationship with film, you know? Like I was pretty much targeted for I wasn't even saying an opinion. I was just like, hey, like it was a book before. And then I got stalked for like a week or so. And then, you know, because TikTok has that function where you can see who's viewing your profile and stuff. And that person was consistently visiting the profile afterwards. And it's just weird and it's just gross. And sadly, like, you know, like I just kind of wanted to be out of it, the very, very, very small spotlight, the most teeniest, tiniest spotlight. I still got burned. You know what I mean? And so I just had to step away for a little bit.
No, I know what you mean. I think you got it the worst, unfortunately, and I feel bad because you were like defending me very like
I just said it was a book before a movie, and next
no,
thing you know,
you didn't
this
say it
dude
like
made
a
three
lot.
different profiles pretending to be me.
No, it was really bad. And for me, like I really love analyzing different movies. Like that's really what I wanted to do on TikTok, and specifically I really wanted to talk about like Lolita. Because I have a lot of really different opinions about the book, and the movie is just like something I've always liked to talk to people about.
Yeah.
You wouldn't believe the controversy
You
about me
Lolita's
saying
just one of those things where sometimes people have like the most ridiculous
all I
um
said was, hey, I think there's some misinterpretations in the film. And
they're
dude,
like,
like,
"Oh, you're a groomer. You're a
and
groomer and you agree with the groomer." It's like, no, like it's
I
so
was like, I
crazy.
was like, yeah, that's not the point of the film, and we need to make changes. And it was almost like, well, you know, like, what do you want to do? Like the actress, like all these irrelevant things to my analysis. And I think you said it best once to me, is just TikTok kind of throws your video out to people, like random people that maybe somewhat have an interest in film. But I think that's the dangerous part of it. Like, you're kind of throwing yourself out
Because
there.
it'll
And
throw out what's going to get the most engagement, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
sometimes hate is the best engagement for your video. And my other cousin, she had a TikTok live that I was a part of, and I was just, and like, she didn't have a crazy amount of views or anything like that, like not like a million followers. I think about 1,000 followers on this account, and the amount of like just like rude comments talking about looks, weight, all things like that. Meanwhile, it was literally like, me and my friends are going to get Dunkin' and go to church. And you have either men in the comments going, will you be my Valentine, ladies? Ladies, will one of you be my Valentine? Or another one would be like it would be the most passive aggressive complimenting I've ever seen. Like the one with the big shoulder in the background got my heart a little beating weird. Like things
Bro,
like that. It's like,
no.
what? Like it would just be like, oh, tell the girl with the big head to the big head to give me her number, or like just something like crazy like that. And it's like, I was debating of doing like some gaming on TikTok live and stuff like that. I'm like, absolutely not. No, not after that. So
um,
sadly, it's just it I think this little break that we had away was me just trying to heal back and not be afraid to do stuff like this. And it's really just sticking with the platforms that I enjoy the most, which are Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify.
positive places, positive places.
Yeah. So I will say this. So this, and keep in mind, if you guys are like listening, you're like, oh no, we could never give our criticism. Criticism is always welcomed. It's just unnecessarily like you didn't understand it, or like things where it's like going to put us down. There's no spot for that here. So this movie is going to have criticism without a doubt, because I've already made a TikTok on it before and it got a little bit heated. I
Oh
personally didn't take
gosh.
anything of it like seriously or anything, because at the end of the day, we're talking about a lot of people who are no longer alive in a situation that no longer really reflects the modern world that we're in right now. So, with that being said, if I am not a historical expert when it comes to this. I do know more than the average person when it comes to On the
Mhm.
Waterfront as a movie and its overall history on it. But I might forget some details. I might accidentally say something wrong. I will do my best to give the facts straight and everything, but I am not a historian. However, Savanna did preface this to me before, that she did have questions about the movie's controversy and everything
Yeah.
like that. So if you have any input or have any more information to list below about the topic, feel free, but please do it in a respectful manner. That's obviously, don't put down anyone else, or either one of us, because this is all just opinionated about a circumstance that none of us were alive for. So Savannah, what
Yes.
were, before we get into the review, I think we should kind of go over the questions that you had now.
Yes.
So what were the questions that you had about On the Waterfront and its controversy?
Okay, so we'll start with the first thing. When you look up the movie, the first thing that comes up is the director.
Yes.
And there's a lot of discourse around him. Even to this day, like there's just a lot of heat around this guy. So I
Yeah.
was just wondering if you can kind of briefly talk about, I guess, his sort of involvement in the McCarthy era and like what happened there. And yeah, let's start with that.
So for a little backstory, at one point, and of course I don't know the dates and the years, but at one point, the director of this film, Elia Kazan, was a communist. And then when he had started stardom and everything like that in the US, he then revoked his stance on communism. Now it's not just a personal thing, and because of this was in the McCarthy era, it was a thing where, in order for him to be still a Hollywood director and make his movies and stuff like that, he had to rat some people out. So he pretty much claimed out and said, I am no longer a communist, but these people here are communists and essentially got a
Mm.
lot of people blackballed from the industry, and those people struggled and stuff while he kind of, he got off scot-free and everything. And on the Waterfront specifically, because Elia Kazan, of course, has made a lot of films. He's made A Streetcar Named Desire. He's made The Ace in the Hole. He's done like East of Eden. Like, he is such a great director of his time. Now, On the Waterfront specifically has controversy compared to his other films because On the Waterfront, in a way, can be considered to be his, I'll say, apology defending film, because
Mm.
in a way On the Waterfront is kind of him making a and taking a scenario and reflecting it on him and how he was justified in doing what he did. So that's why On the Waterfront. So it's one thing to, rat out on your colleagues and things like that who share the same ideology as you, and then they suffer while you parade around Hollywood, and then you make a film about doing so, and it ends up becoming one of the highest praised films of that generation. So it really was a huge slap in the face and more, and so extremely detrimental to the people who were routed out during this time. There might be some other details in between, but that really is the main gist of why people will genuinely say that they won't watch this film.
Oh, okay, that's interesting. So I guess the next question, and sort of the last question before we get into it, is
Hmm.
when it comes to this movie, I know we've talked a little bit about the debate of separating the art from the artist.
Yeah.
So what do you think about, I guess, this film? Because um, it really is like the art is pretty much reflecting the artist itself. So I, for one, did enjoy this movie, but I was just wondering what you think about that in the context of everything. Like, what do you think about the debate here?
I guess it's one of those things where that debate is so universal,
Yeah,
but we have to be honest with ourselves, and we will stretch and pull that debate in so many ways for directors that we love and want to recognize. And we want, because I think at the end of the day, no one wants to feel bad or guilty for enjoying something, right? Whether
of
it's
course.
a, Elia Kazan film, whether it's a Roman Polanski, or a, any, you could name so many people in Hollywood. But in terms of separating the art from the artist, this one is difficult because it's in my head. Obviously, I should say, like, oh, like Elia Kazan's a bad person, what he did, and things like that. But I am so far removed from a situation like this compared to a woman being raped by a director. Do you know what I mean? Like that? Like I'm just so far removed away from this treachery and all things like that, that I, for the longest time, I guess it's just so easy for me to say in this case, separate the art from the artist. But if you were to ask, okay, Roman Polanski, it's a lot more muddled and dark and gray. So for me, this is an easy separate the art from the artist. But it might not be for most people, and I can understand that. And it's, I guess for this one, because I've seen the movie and I loved the movie before I even learned much about the history behind it. Because I found the Criterion, and keep in mind, like, Criterion Collection also does not really show this. And like, in terms of like the behind the scene features, as far as I remember, and I watch all the behind the scene features because I did a paper on the Waterfront in college. I did a 12-page essay on this film, and I still did not get into at the time, because it just wasn't like the articles and stuff like that, where the discourse about it didn't come back around again until what, probably 2 years ago. So when I first learned about this very in depth, I really even didn't know to the extent of this treachery and how this was a full basis for, like, the whole film was an excusal, like, apology. This is why I did what I did type thing. What do you think in this circumstance?
I agree with you with a lot of what you said. I think another thing that is relevant in this conversation is like when we talk about people like Roman Polanski, when we talk about people like Woody Allen, it's a bit different because they were rewarded and pretty much still making films after their crimes and controversy. So I think there's a difference between, watching a movie that's over 70 years old that had at the time like very bad repercussions. There's nothing we can do about that right now, right? Like he's not making any more movies. Um,
Which
there's no
one? The Roman
Elia Kazan.
Polanski?
No, Elia Kazan. Like
Oh yeah,
there's
he
not
passed away.
there's not much that we can do. Like so if I watch On the Waterfront, it's not like I'm supporting anything. Um, and that's different when it comes to people like Woody Allen, Roman Polanski, where I believe they're still active, or were active after their controversy and were making money, even though like they did all these things. Another thing I really believe in, especially when it's this far from like removed from us, like you were saying, is it up to the consumer to still uphold that? If there's nothing we can do about it, there's nothing I can do about this. It's not like this guy's still making money. He's
Well,
not still.
it's also like things like, like for example, like John Wayne. John Wayne is still such like that name and everything is still such a prominent name in Hollywood. But like, let's be real. Like John Wayne was a racist and a sexist,
Oh,
But
sure.
anytime, like he's still synonymous with the genre and the controversy never comes about. I feel like controversies, like every director has their dirty laundry. Like, let's make that absolutely clear. Every actor, actress, no one is perfect. Like, we love Jane Fonda, but at some point in her life, she was Hanoi Jane and things like that. So it's like everyone goes through their own controversy. It's just, what do we pick and choose to be a controversy?
Yeah, and I think there's also like a scale too. Um, Now, I think particularly with him, I do think, like you were saying, it's one thing to do what you did, and there's another there's another thing to make a whole film about like why you were, justified.
Yeah.
But I also think On the Waterfront, when you watch it, it's not entirely about that. Like you can take, like you were saying, like you wrote a whole 12-page paper without even knowing. Like you
Yeah,
can get
because
something
all
out of the
the
film
stories and
without.
everything talking about, like, how the gangsters had run, the docks and everything like that is all true. It's just kinda like it was very much, I believe, circumstantial to where it was like, in a way, this is very self-reflecting of this, and this will kinda be like my apology, but, like, without ever saying it, and with having a plot so detailed and so based on already other facts that it could easily fall through the cracks.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Okay. It's very interesting too that people are so, um when you made your video, were so defensive about it.
So defensive. And I think also this was also during 2020, 2021. This was at the time where, people were beginning to identify again as a communist, and people, and not the fact that, like, and I'm talking about people in America as like a, like almost like a trend, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was during the time when people were, bored online and looking up that type of stuff and trying to, and it just happens. Like, we always cycle through this stuff. But 10 years ago, when I wrote the essay on it, maybe not 10 years ago, but maybe like 5 or 6 years ago, when I wrote the essay on it, whenever I talked about On the Waterfront, no one, and ever since before 2020, no one ever mentioned the discourse about On the Waterfront to me. And I've told many people, because it was one of my top 10 favorite films of all time. So I'd be like, On the Waterfront, no one ever mentioned it to me. And it feels like maybe those who were a part of the time knew it, those who were really big into film like us ended up finding out about it eventually. And then there was that big resurgence in the topic of communism, and this movie came about. And it's a headline. Can you believe a film in the 1950s about a guy who rat out this blah 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 blah? It's a headline. Like the article I was just reading about it from the LA Times that says Elia Kazan named names then made On the Waterfront to justify his treachery is an article that only came out in 2020.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So I personally also too, like, I'm not a political person. I have obviously opinions and stuff, but in reality, and some people might think like that's so silly, that's so stupid. I am very far removed from a situation like this to where it really doesn't bug me, if that makes sense. Like it doesn't really cross my mind, and it, like, when I think about On the Waterfront, I don't think about this. And that's also, I think, partly due to the fact that I was just exposed to it when I just knew it as a good film rather than it, anything more than the backstory. Like, I had known the, Kazan, in order to make On the Waterfront, had ratted out names, but I didn't know the full impact. And keep in mind too, this is a younger version of me that thought he was possibly just doing a good thing and was getting the bad guys out because history likes to muddle that type of stuff. So, but it's so this is it's kind of like saying, like, am I actively, and it's funny that I say this because I myself am one of the biggest haters of this film. It's like Birth of a Nation. I'm the biggest hater for Birth of a Nation. Does it actually matter to me at all? No, it doesn't, because I'm so far removed from it. And why am I going to have, like, and when we talk about it, I will hate on that film because there's nothing good about that film. Like, let's be real. But, like, I'm so far removed from that film. I was not born in the early 1900s. I am, like, like, that movie does not play a role in my life, but I will still hate on it because it deserves hate, but it matters nothing in my life.
No, I understand. I think, but I just think with On the Waterfront, you can appreciate that this is a genuinely very well written, good movie, but then also say, yeah, Eli Kazan probably shouldn't have done that. And this is some background on the making of this film. I don't think we need to make On the Waterfront the like the entirety of On the Waterfront Eli Kazan's actions. I understand, like, it was not like he clearly is a hypocrite for doing that, and there's a lot of nuance
Oh,
there. But like
he'll
you were
still be a
saying,
rat. He went down a
a
rat in
rat is a
history.
rat and a hypocrite. This guy, okay, you could say he's a hypocrite. Oh, you're a communist, but you want to make a movie, so I'm gonna like. You can say these things and still appreciate that. Yeah, it sucks that he did that. It's we need to have it somewhere. We need to have this file. We need to have this documented, and it's a part of history. On the Waterfront is a well written, good film that you can take
Yeah.
things away from without also doing that. Um,
I
so
can
I
also
just think,
see the
yeah,
controversy behind, because On the Waterfront, Brando, and when we fully get into, like, reviewing it as a movie, I could see why people would be upset about how the movie, if we are going with how this was an apology film for Kazan and everything like that, or not an apology, but a justification film for that type of stuff, the fact that he had essentially, you know, communists be the role of gangsters. I could understand, like, yeah, that very much can be offensive, but it was also the times. We also have to remember the times and how paranoid people were back then. Was it justified? Absolutely not. But you can't change history. Like, it's just how people were viewed back then. And just
well,
because you
I would
like a
also
movie,
say, like, to be honest, like, it wasn't even that. It was more of the fact that, like, he was a communist, like, point
yeah,
blank, and he just ratted out his essentially his community to make this movie. And I think that's the bigger problem we need to look at. Like, he literally was a communist that was like, oh, okay, like, I kind of need to make this movie, so I'm not really a communist anymore, and here's like names. That's more of the problem. And then, like, you make a whole film pretty much demonizing the same group you were in.
yeah.
So I think we can recognize that he was a huge hypocrite. He was a rat. He was a dirty rat, and we'll leave it at that. And I think,
But
like,
it's a part of history, and I don't
that's what
think it's a
exactly.
part of history. It's not a pretty part of history, but it is what it is, and it happened, and it's still a great film, and it
Yeah.
still portrays a history of that, a history that sadly had mimicked a history of his own, but it still portrayed someone's history. Like, Father Lee, not Lee J. Cobb, but I think his name was Father Cobb, but the father character in On the Waterfront was actually based on real people. Like, so many people a part of this film were based on real people in the areas and everything. So I would hate to see a controversy that that pose issues and kind of pose a reason why to not watch a good film like this.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it's overall, like, if we're going to talk about like my firm, like how I feel about separating the art from the artist type stuff, I think we're at a point where people are going to mess up. People are going to do the foulest stuff ever. I think you can separate the art from the artist as long as you're not promoting the person any further from after, the truth has come out about them.
Sure,
Like
absolutely.
Roman Polanski should not be making films. Woody Allen should not be making films. And Woody Allen is such even more of a gray area because some people will say like it's consensual, but it's still like so weird that I'm not even
The
going to touch
fact that we
that.
even have to like even make excuse, yeah, no, yeah. The fact that we
But
even have
it's
to do that is
but it's
ridiculous.
also like we know that like almost so many Hollywood actors were horrible to their wives, were horrible people in general. Like Marlon Brando, one of my favorite actors of all times, was probably the worst boyfriend, husband, lover anyone could have ever been with in the time. So it's just but also at the end of the day, Marlon Brando was a huge activist. So people are not meant to just be inherently good all the time. People are going to make mistakes. People are going to have horrible, horrible character flaws. I think we just
Yeah,
have to accept that because at the end of the day, we're going to be living through a point where everything is going to be documented, everything, and no one is ever going to be squeaky clean. And I don't mean like, oh, they didn't serve jail time, but in terms of like the public eye, no one is ever going to be squeaky clean, whether it's for something as horrible like a sexual assault or a rape, or as simple as like, remember that time Ariana Grande licked a donut at a donut shop and then put it back, or something really stupid, which did
yeah,
happen, and
like
I
just
remember that. But it's always going to happen. And I think if we don't learn how to separate the art from the artist now, we will be devoided of a lot of art.
yeah, I agree for
So I
sure.
think overall, I feel like I've gone back and forth over the years of it, but I feel like right now is like a firm stance. And, it's still not black and white. It's still not the same. Like someone brought up, I think it was actually David from the Criterion cast. He brought up, like, oh, do you plan, like, because I said, oh, I wouldn't watch a new Roman Polanski film, but then pointed out that the pianist came out after already the allegations had occurred. So is
Mm.
that something that's off? I guess for me, it's going to be like from when I find out till on type thing.
I also feel like there is a difference between like the pianist is also like 20 years old, right? So like if I go, watch it on a streaming service, I think that's different than like actively going to see his new movie and promote it. So I
Hmm.
just feel like there's a lot of nuance when it
Yeah.
comes to that stuff. So it's hard. It's
And
hard.
and some people might totally agree. Some people might go, "Hey, you guys watched On the Waterfront and reviewed it. I'm not cool with that." Okay, like that's totally fine. Like you have your own boundaries when it
For
comes to
sure.
media and everything like that. Like that is to be respected. But obviously we're not defending anyone here.
No.
Um we're just taking the controversies, analyzing them, and then reviewing what we believe to be a very good film. Spoiler alert. So I feel like, do you have any other things that you want to add to that whole discourse before jumping into the review?
No, I think I said everything and I think you answered it all my questions very well.
Perfect. And if anyone has anything to say, like if like for one thing, I was thinking about what were from these the other directors and people in Hollywood who were blacklisted, what was the outcome? Was it just they were out of a job? Was it just were they deported? What was, so if you have more information about this that was not known or was not shared during this episode, please feel free to let us know. I always love finding out new history. We even had a comment recently where someone from Italy, so when we were talking about Two Men in Town, someone from Italy commented and actually said, like, hey, by the way, that Italian director, um, it's kind of known that he lied about him being, because that director had a controversy involving him and the fascist regime, and essentially someone commented saying like, hey, like actually he was part of a fascist party and a fascist movement and stuff like that. So, and I said, "Oh wow, like thank you for letting us know." Like that's really interesting and something that I did not find because I just could only find stuff of him saying, the guy vehemently saying, "I'm not a fascist." So it, we'll take it in everything with a grain of salt, of course. But if you have any discourse to add on to this, please comment below. Now, with that being said, let's get into On the Waterfront as a film. You ready, Savannah?
Yup.
Okay. So, just a little backstory on the Waterfront. It is a film that came out in 1954, and it is about an ex-prize fighter starring as Marlon Brando, turned New Jersey longshoreman, struggles to stand up to his corrupt union bosses, including his older brother, as he starts to connect with the grieving sister of one of the syndicate's victims. So, this movie I love. I think it's such a well done film. And of course, it's directed by Elia Kazan. It is written by Bud Schulberg and Elia Kazan as well. And it stars Marlon Brando, Carl Malden, Lee J. Cobb, Rod Steiger, and where's her name? Her name's not on here. Oh, there we go. Eva Marie Saint. So Savannah, you were the one. Was this your first time watching On the Waterfront?
Oh no, no. You lent the video. This is one of the first movies you lent to me.
Okay, and so how did you find the movie when you first saw it? And I guess, how do you feel about it now, like reflecting on it?
I had the same reaction. My first thought after I finished this movie was Marlon Brando just really like, and maybe in all his films, but especially this one, he stands out so much that it is distracting in the best way possible compared
Yeah.
to everybody else in the room. And everybody else is a fairly like good actor. Like they're very good actors, everybody else. But he, like, the entire movie, you are just focused on him. When somebody else is talking, you're still looking at him. Um, and I just feel like he has this very unique quality of being in all his films having this very convincing personality,
Yeah.
very unique. And in this film, it really like stands alone because he's playing this like rehabilitated tough guy, I guess, to put it in the best way possible. And in the entire, like throughout the beginning to the end, it is such a powerful performance. It is just so convincing.
Yeah. I think that's one of my favorite, like, one of the many reasons why I hail Brando as like my favorite actor of all time, because I genuinely do not know of another actor that can just go on to a set, be in front of the camera, and even during his worst of the worst films, still just be entirely enamored by him and his presence and everything like that. And maybe it could be, especially his older films, due to already the presence that he established as, like, the king of Hollywood at the time, like the best actor ever. But I totally agree with you. He just knows how to embody the character so well. And I think for something like this, the character he plays is not far off at all from him in a way, where it is a kind of like a delinquent growing up. And Brando was always a delinquent. I will just say it. Like, he got kicked out of like military school. He couldn't even serve the army because he had a football injury and stuff like that. Was just overall like a big prankster and all things like that. And although we don't get to see that soft side of Brando in this film, it definitely feels like this is how Brando could have ended up if he didn't become an actor. And I think that's actually one thing that he says the reason why he wanted to be a part of this was because it felt very close to him. Um,
Right.
and I really just, Brando made his mark because you'll watch this film and Brando will say something and you're like, huh? And keep in mind, for for back in the day, to have a mumbly actor, someone who's like, no, this is realistic, I'm just going to mumble and use my regular voice, I'm not going to do a transatlantic voice. This was big, like, for him to just go against what everyone was doing and to, like, in a way, like, not be afraid to be a little bit more natural, not be afraid to be a little bit more of himself. I think genuinely it was because he was lazy and he was like, no, I don't want to do the accent.
It's so funny because he has such a specific accent. I've never heard anybody else with that. I don't know. I think he's from the Midwest or something, but like he has
Yeah.
such a specific accent in all of his films. It's the same accent, but it's so unique. You know, it's Brando. It's just one of those people where you're just like, it's Brando, and I've not heard one person replicate it well. Um, Something
Yeah,
really interesting. Yeah.
it's the mumble. It's the mumble that he has. Like obviously you're not like going, what is he saying the entire time? But it definitely feels like the mumble is kind of like representing like him letting his guard down as an actor. Meanwhile, in reality, Brando was a pioneer and he didn't even know it, or sometimes he knew it and he just didn't care. Like just being Godfather and stuff like that was just something that was just like okay for him. It wasn't anything big like how any other actor would have viewed it.
You know, the best part about this movie, speaking of his voice, um, I don't know if he wrote, because I don't know if he just ad libbed some of these lines, but he had really, really interesting one liners in the movie. And I wrote one down because I like laughed so hard. I don't know what he was talking to the main actress. I don't even know what the context of this was, but I just wrote on my notes, I don't like the country. The crickets make me nervous. That's what I wrote
Yeah.
down because I laughed so hard. I was like, that's so random. Did he make that up? I can see him making that up. I don't like the country. The crickets make me nervous. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I think for Brando, he would ad lib some things here and there, like very, like not like completely change the lines and stuff like that. But this is a little bit early on in his career, so normally, like the ad libbing didn't get until later on. Possibly, definitely, possibly that he could have ad libbed some things in here, but I don't think it was like he was just creating massive amount of dialogue on the spot. Um, so yeah, and then like he's also like he's so good at playing characters and like just investing in them, like when in the scenes when he's talking to his brother and everything like that, like it genuinely like he has such a great way of expressing emotions through such minimal facial changes. Like when he's in the
Mm-hmm.
car, I can even see him like just going like, with the whole I'm a bum scene, like just seeing the facial expressions and everything like that. And almost, kind of almost like makes you wonder, like, did he, in order to create a performance so well, did he even believe that in himself? Because it's such a realistic performance. And he's just so involved and becomes his characters that he plays. Even, and I'll tell you, there's so many films with Brando that no one would want to see. Like there's one film he did called Candy. There's other films like he did one, I think it was called like Bedtime Stories and stuff like that. And even for the silliest and possibly dumbest films he's in, he still gave 110%, which always blew my mind because he always acted like he didn't. And so it's just, did he actually care and just pretended that he didn't want to care, or was he just that good?
I don't know. Like, I honestly, when I read his biography, he, I'm convinced this man did not care.
Yeah.
This man had such a lax attitude towards acting. And it's not like it was ungrateful, but it almost came across where like, it is what it is. Like, this is how I make a like that sort of attitude of where it's just like, yeah, this is what I do. So I would be very surprised if he actually like, oh, I love this. I care so much. Like, I'd be very surprised because he's always had this very like nonchalant attitude about his craft, which is incredible if that's the truth. Like,
Yeah,
if he,
it's
that's
so like that's
incredible.
why I almost doubt it. Like maybe at a point you did really care because it's just you were so good. Like how could you be so good and not even care just remotely? And Brando wrote that autobiography when he was a lot older. So maybe, and I know Hollywood was not necessarily kind to him. He lost a lot of friends over the years from like drug addictions and issues and stuff like that, and was constantly under scrutiny on set for weight gain and things like that, which is honestly just some of the like some of the most interesting stuff I've ever heard about old Hollywood is just hearing about the eating habits of some of these older celebrities. And I do find it very fascinating to watch those and just hear like how Brando would take ice cream and go in a canoe and be on a lake while they were filming and no one could get him and he wouldn't come back until he was done with his ice cream. So like it's just crazy stuff that I find so interesting. And yet I think he really like after On the Waterfront, he probably could have quit. You know, after Godfather, he definitely could have quit after
Oh, for
Godfather.
sure.
But it
Yeah.
just felt like he just kept going and going and going, like until he was even. Did you know that he was supposed to be in like one of the Scary movies?
Oh my
He
god.
was
How
literally going to be in Scary Movie. Like he actually had like a scene in it, but then had to stop because he had health issues.
that's insane. That guy was old at that point.
Yeah, like he was in like his late 70s, early 80s cuz he died in 2004. I think at 82, 83. So he was like up there and they sent him the script for Scary Movie and he was like, why not?" And he, like and but couldn't due to health issues.
Wow.
Can you
No,
imagine that?
don't tell me you don't
I
care.
I
Don't
think
tell me
that
you
was
don't care if you're accepting like a scary movie at 80 years old. You
and
care
he
so
did
bad.
like there was he owned an island in Tahiti. He owned a house on Mulholland Drive. So part of me, maybe it wasn't even the fact that he cared, but maybe he just had more of a like, screw it, why not type attitude as well, where it's like, okay, and then did it.
Mhm.
So that's definitely the vibe I get from him in a lot of his choices. But one thing I will say that I really I don't think gets talked about a lot is in the 40s, 50s, and even I think in the 60s, Carl Malden and Brando were featured in like 3 or 4 films together, and I absolutely love them as a duo. I think Carl Malden, because they were both in Streetcar Named Desire, they were in On the
Yes.
Waterfront, and I even believe that Brando was also alongside him in One Eye Jacks. So I really like them as a duo. And I think it's like when you compare their performances from Streetcar Named Desire to this movie to One Night Jacks, they are such completely different performances. And yet, like for both of them, and yet they can so maintain like that same connection, that same little something something that just works. So I
Yeah,
feel
for
like that
sure.
doesn't get pointed a lot. I think like honestly, like probably one of my favorite duos are just like common actors to just kind of walk across the screen together multiple times. So
Yeah,
I
that's a
really
good
like them
point.
too. And I think
That's a
Carl
very good
Malden
point.
does not get enough recognition as the actor that he is. I think he's very, very talented, and especially in his role here in On the Waterfront.
Oh yeah, 100%. I do feel like though it is a situation where like because he was paired up with such big actors, like it was almost overshadowing a little bit, especially with Brando, because like I said, like Brando is just he has this insane personality in all his movies that is just you can't take your eyes off of him. So I
Yeah.
feel like maybe some of the credit doesn't come to him because of that.
Yeah, and but I also do think out of all of the actors that Brando has been on screen with, I think Carl Malden has been by far the most complimentary to him. And even like when we think of like Godfather and all his bigger films and stuff like that, I do think that he's been the most complimentary to Brando's style of acting. Because, for example, if you had Marlon Brando and Carl Malden, and Brando's doing like his whole very relaxed, mumbling dialogue, Carl Malden would actually kind of go on a similar level and match. Because Carl Malden wasn't super transatlantic for its time. He
Hmm.
did go a little bit more natural and a little bit more rugged and not being afraid to make mistakes. So I feel like out of all the actors that Brando has been with, he's been the most complimentary to him in his entire career.
Very interesting.
That's just me though. That's just me. Apparently they also did Broadway together too.
Oh, they were buddies.
Yeah, so they were actually pretty good friends it seems. Um Now I will say sadly Eva Marie Saint is a little bit, she just because of the cast and the direction and everything like that. And I don't even think it's her. I think it's her character doesn't hold a strong performance and a strong weight in this film. It's more so just a point. Like and that's obviously like this is like the crux of a lot of films of this age, right? And this era where females are just kind of used to heighten a plot point rather than be characters. Did you feel that way about Eva Marie Saint, or is it just I?
No, unfortunately, like it's just a situation where like I didn't think she was a bad actor, but when you have characters like you do on the waterfront, when you have Marlon Brando, when you have the gangsters and everything, all this crazy plot line, she definitely kind of seems invisible. And it's not her fault. It's not that she puts a bad performance like you were saying, but like it really doesn't match up. And I do think that's just lack of I don't know if it's plot or I don't know if it's dialogue. I don't know what they could have done there, but like it definitely seemed like she was just a tool to kind of get, to Marlon Brando's character and things like that. It's sad because I don't think she's a bad actor. I just think that like compared to everybody else, she just doesn't make it.
Yeah, it's just I think it's also that it's one of those things where many actresses could have played her character, and that's the downfall of it. And I agree, it's not her, it's just a poorly written character and the grand scheme of everything. But you know what? Shout out to Queen Eva Marie Saint. Eva, if you're listening to this, love you. You're still alive, which is insane. 98 years old. That's pretty cool. And look at you now. Everyone else is gone, and you're here, girly. You're queen.
Exactly.
You're queen. And she's from New Jersey, representing the story
Oh
like
my
like
gosh.
no other.
Another Jersey girl. We have to shout her, of course.
So shout out to Eva Marie Saint. Um, and now, okay, another person who I feel like we have to talk about and dissect a little is another person who I feel like can match Brando. Hasn't been with Brando a lot in other movies. I think this is like their only, maybe there was one other film, but Lee J. Cobb. Lee J. Cobb is a powerhouse that no one talked about because he was also in 12 Angry Men, and he was
Oh,
also in so
yes.
many other films, and he plays some of the most memorable characters ever. Like they're just it's so like his character and his work and everything like that is so incredible. Like I think he's, and not a lot of people, when you think about like big time actors from the 50s, Lee J. Cobb doesn't come to mind. But
No, he
he's done
doesn't.
so much. Like he was in Exodus, he was in 12 Angry Men, On the Waterfront. He was in Our Man Flint, and I think he was in, I don't think he was in Double Indemnity, but there was something else that he was in. But yeah, like I just think he was overall like had such range, but also knew like kind of, because I would say 12 Angry Men and his character in this film are a little bit reflective of each other because
Yeah.
they have that high intensity. But man, even if it's a copy paste, he still does it so well.
I do think, besides Marlon Brando, he is probably the only one else you would really like pay attention to in this film.
Yeah.
Everyone else is a great actor, but like in terms of standing out performances, in terms of people you can't take your eyes off, it's a close second to Brando.
This actually came out before 12 Angry Men too. So I
I
think,
figured.
and I didn't think so. I actually thought that this was after. So now I'm actually even more impressed because I do think the fact that he was able to start off earlier with this type of role is pretty damn good. Like like that's crazy. Cuz I thought it was like, oh, he had his success with 12 Angry Men and then did this. But the fact that it's reversed is, I really solidifies how great of an actor he was.
Oh, for sure.
And I'm looking through. He did a lot of other movies. He had a very like long career. But in terms of like big name movies, I can't really figure out any other big name films that he was a part of that I'd be like, oh yeah, you know what I mean.
Hmm.
But regardless, still powerhouse of an actor. Um,
Now, did this film win any awards?
It did. So Marlon Brando did, I believe, win the Oscar. It actually won 8 Oscars.
Wow.
So it won Best Picture, Best Actor for Brando, Best Actress for Eva Marie Saint, Best Director for Elia Kazan,
Really?
Best Writing for Bud Schulberg, Best Cinematography for Boris Kaufman, Best Art Direction, Best Film Editing, and everyone, essentially, Lee J. Cobb was nominated, Carl Malden was nominated, Rod Steiger was nominated, and Leonard Bernstein was nominated for the score. So every big person in this film got a nominee.
That's insane.
Yeah.
She got. Who else was up for Best Actress? Do you know?
Ooh, I don't know. So this was in 54, so this might have been
Yeah.
the 1955 Oscars. Let's see. 1955 Oscars.
Because like I'm very not that she was bad, but I'm just very and I don't know.
Let's see. Let's see. I'm looking at the That's crazy that they were doing honorary awards in the 50s.
Yeah, yeah.
Walt Disney won an award that year.
Mr. Disney?
Mr. Disney. I'm looking. My God, Bob Hope was the host.
Jesus,
Damn.
how old was he
I
then?
don't. Is he still alive? No, he had to die like 4 years ago, right? Okay, no, he died way older. I'm thinking of someone else. I'm thinking of another Bob. Okay, actress. So she was actress in a supporting role. So
Oh,
she was
okay.
up against Claire Trevor for The High and the Mighty, Jan Sterling for The High and the Mighty, Katie Gerardo for Broken Lance, Nina Foch for Executive Suite. But for best, so that was supporting. For actress, if she had gotten best actress nominations, she would have been up against Grace Kelly, Judy Garland, Audrey Hepburn.
Wow.
Yeah, so that year Grace Kelly won for The Country Girl, which is a movie I've never heard of. I have never heard of The Country Girl.
I've only seen her in like one movie also, but I guess, yeah.
Oh, that's really interesting. This was actually during the time when they were doing both a best art direction for black and white film and a best art direction for color. So it was 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea that made Disney win the award. And then
God, I've never seen that movie.
on the Waterfront won the black and white direction one. That's so interesting. I never really would have thought the fact that they would have split categories amongst black and white and then color for like film nominations.
Yeah, I don't get that either, but it's the 50s, man. I don't know.
Bro, documentary feature. They were making documentaries in the 50s? Like, seriously, like, what documentary do you know from the 50s?
I don't know any
But
documentaries.
Disney one for The Vanishing Prairie.
What?
Yeah.
What was going on with Disney back then?
Bro,
What were they
Disney,
doing?
he was in it. He was in it. He was in it for sure.
All
But,
right, they can't say he wasn't a hustler, but
yeah. Well, that's also another person, too. Like, sorry to get on this tangent, separate the art from the artist. Like, Walt Disney was not the best broski. You know, he has a past of his own. But you and I still hold Disney passes, you know, like
I still got to see Mickey. What can I say? It's not
I
Mickey's
gotta
fault.
see Oswald. But a little bit more with On the Waterfront, and then we'll wrap it up because we're about at an hour right now.
Ooh.
Genuinely, so I had said that I had wrote a essay on this film, and I was so impressed with the research and the care that was done, because in reality, and like, I don't view this film as anti-union. A lot of people will say it's an anti-union film. No, this was showing actually how mobsters and gangsters and just overall not great people were taking advantage of a system and using it against others. So for this one, this, like, the Jersey docks was riddled, and still is, with a lot of, you know,
Like
crime
crime,
and
yeah.
issues involving like the docks and the business behind the docks and everything like that. So it was really fascinating to see, like, for example, a lot of the extras used were actual dock workers who worked for the docks and everything that they were like literally filming about and all stuff like that. Like, and the fact that, that Bud Schulberg went and did so much research and so much time, like even meeting up with, and I think the father's name was Father Barry, which is played by Carl Malden, like actually having Carl Malden meet with the real life Father Barry and talking with him and like all this type of stuff, because it was essentially like taking a circumstance, like a fictional circumstance, and applying it to like this part of New Jersey's real life. So I very much appreciate that. And I love the fact, and I highly encourage, like, I know you're probably going to look up the bad stuff about On the Waterfront, but I also recommend looking up about this type of stuff like this, and how in a way this did give voices still to people who were having issues with mobs and gangsters running the docks and everything like that.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
it's a very complex film. It's very, very complex in the way that it was made and everything. I also think it's genuinely one of, I don't think it's Brando's best, but I do, because I'm so partial to Last Tango in Paris.
Oh my God.
I
We
do
still have
think,
not, we've been doing this podcast for almost 3 years, and we're going to need to get to that
I
because
know.
the people don't know how deep this runs with you.
Bestie, they know. I made a 20-minute video just rambling on my own like 5 years ago about Last Tango in Paris. They know. They can look it up and see. But that's also another one where we're going to have to do, here's the discourse. I think I'm fascinated by controversial films, and not to say that it's like, oh, for my enjoyment, that people get hurt in the making of things. But it's just something like, I feel like they're the ones that end up getting known, and you have a curiosity for them, right?
Of
Like if someone
course.
says this is controversial, you're going to go, why? Let me find out. But this, I really enjoy this film, and I think the directing in this film is fantastic. Brando's performance, my favorite performance is when him and Lee J. Cobb are on the dock and Brando is on this bridge, and they're just having a heated argument. And I think it's such amazing acting. I think it's so, so good.
Yeah,
Their exchange and stuff. The whole I'm a bum and everything like that speech and everything is great too.
of
And
course.
Brando's little idiosyncratic mannerisms and everything like that, like, are just so weird but so interesting. But I thoroughly love this movie. I mean, any other things that you saw about this movie, Savannah, that you were like, ooh, I love this, I didn't love this, but anything?
I do think Marlon Brando sort of introduces, like, I feel like back then, the range for male actors was very like macho or suave gentleman, and I feel like Marlon Brando introduced sort of a new character to film in general, like the rehabilitated tough guy, the guy that has regret, has emotion. So I think for that alone, you have to watch the movie because he definitely like creates almost this new sub character in film.
Yeah. And also, I just looked it up. The leading characters were based on these people. So, Terry Malloy was actually based on a longshoreman and whistleblower named Anthony De Vincenzo. Father Barry was based on the waterfront priest John M. Corridon, and John Friendly was based on the mobster Albert Anastasia. So, these were real people stories. I even thought for a second that Terry Malloy. I thought Terry Malloy was a fake one, just from my memory, but I knew Father Barry, and I wasn't so sure about John Friendly. But the fact that like all three of your big main characters are based on real people involved in this and affected by this, and had a, I think Anthony DeVincenzo and John M. Corridon had says in it. I don't think. I would be surprised if the gangster had a say in it. You
Yeah,
know what I
yeah,
mean?
probably not, probably not.
You're gonna make a video about my schemes. So so yeah, like I love this movie. I think it's fantastic. Also the score. We can't forget about Leonard Bernstein's
Oh,
score.
of course, of course.
So good in this movie. I will say, do you prefer, so out of other Elia Kazan films, because you've seen Streetcar Named Desire, did you ever see East of Eden?
I did see East of Eden.
which one in terms of Elia Kazan's directing do you like the most?
Oh, that's kind of hard. I think directing probably this movie, but acting, I don't think we can discredit Miss Vivian Lee's performance. I think she's just keeps up with Brando in a different way in that film. So I really loved Streetcar Named Desire for her performance, and I genuinely just I like the whole story a little bit better, entertainment wise. But I do think this movie directing and writing is definitely a few notches higher.
Yeah. I also really like East of Eden. I think I love On the Waterfront more as like a story as a whole, but I really love the directing in East of Eden. Like
Yeah.
there's one shot where that just like has a grip on my heart where James Dean is on a swing talking to his father and kind of like menacingly talking to him and things like that. It's such a good scene. I also forgot to say I said I'm a bum, but I meant to say that I'm a contender
No,
speech.
I knew what you
That's
were. I knew exactly what you were
that's what
saying.
I
Yes.
just remember him going, I'm a bum. I'm a bum, Charlie. I'm a bum. But I meant to say the contender speech. Also, so I did find something else that I thought was very, very interesting. So you know the kid with who was the pigeon handler.
Mm-hmm.
So it says here his father, a longshoreman, had been blackballed for anti-union activities. Interesting. Interesting.
Wow.
Funnily, that's very on par with
That's what I'm
Elia
saying. It was
Kazan
right
in the
on the
history,
bar.
and it
Yeah,
says
really on point.
and disappeared when the teenager was 4 months old. Elia Kazan and Bud Schulberg had him audition for the role and coaxed an angry response out of him by calling his father a rat. He was paid
Stop.
$500 for the role, but never acted again. He went on to become a longshoreman and in 2002 was elected recording secretary of his union after the corrupt leadership was ousted for another union.
Wow.
So the whole corruption and everything with the unions and a lot has been ongoing. Does that mean unions need to go away? No, we just have to make sure that unions aren't misused and that people
Of
don't, feel
course.
threatened and things like that.
Of course. Of course.
So yeah,
That
I'm
guy has
seeing.
some nerve calling people rats, but whatever. That's
Yeah,
all I'm gonna say.
yeah. Kazan, you've just dropped on the list. You're gonna tell a child that his father was a rat. Meanwhile, you're the rat. You should be saying that to yourself in the mirror, rat. My God. Can you imagine seeing like, "Hey kid, can you act?" I don't want to act. Yeah, well, your father's a rat. My father's a rat. You're in the film. We'll pay you $500, and he can't say no because $500 that point was like $1,000,000.
Of course, of course. This poor kid.
So, but that's really funny. That's actually I love that. That's like my new favorite trivia is the fact that that I love that. Okay, so that is so we got to give a so we obviously we both own or at least I own the Criterion. Did you ever buy the Criterion?
You gave me a copy.
I did. I did because I had the old original version of the Criterion, then I bought the new one and then I gave you the old one. Okay. So you have the copy of it and everything. If you didn't have it, would you own it?
I'd say I'd have it, yeah. I'd say I'd revisit this every once in a while for sure.
Same here. Same here. This is definitely something that, despite its history, I would still show people and be like, by the way, like after watching it, yeah, that was a good film. By the way, did you know the director? And just, give them the whole treatment of what we just did here earlier. What would you rate the film?
Ooh, okay. I feel like just entertainment value alone, probably like an 8.7, only because I feel like this movie's very dialogue heavy. Some things do happen, of course, like plot wise, but um, it's not the most, how do I put this, exciting film in terms of like, there's just long sequences of people talking. So probably 8.7, but for the writing, for the directing, for the acting, I'd give it probably a 9.5.
I agree. It is a bit of a drag of a film. Like it does feel a lot longer than what it is, and I already do think it is a little bit on the longer side. Let me double check that. It is nope, it's an hour and a half. Wow,
It
that
feels
felt
like
I thought it was
two.
a
It feels
3-hour
like
film.
that's what I'm
Genuinely
saying.
genuinely
Feels
thought it
two
was
and
a
a half
3-hour
hours.
film. But
Yeah.
that's one of the cons of it. It is a fun rewatch, but not every year, maybe every decade. You know, you're like, "Oh,
Exactly.
it's on the turn of classic. I got an hour and a half," and then you feel like it's been 3 hours. But yeah, like I this movie was a big catalyst for me in like learning about film and the knowledge about film. I mean, I did a full 12-page paper on it, you
Of
know.
course.
And the paper was, by the way, it wasn't even for a film class. It was for English. It was just you had to do it an essay on anything. And I said why I thought On the Waterfront was actually like one of the best films ever made. And I still stand by that. I genuinely think for its time and stuff like that, it does. So because of that, I'm gonna have to give it. And of course, this was during a time before, like before the bank of movies that I have now lodged in my head. Um, but I still think it is. I genuinely think it is one of the best, maybe like top 25 best films made of all time. And despite its controversy and everything. So with that, I'd say it's a 9 out of 10. It'd be a 10 out of 10 if it wasn't so slow.
Yes, for sure.
Um, but thank you guys so much for listening. Once again, if you have any comments or anything like that on the film, please leave it down below. And next time you hear from us, we are going to be doing a little bit of a double feature. We're going to be talking about Lady Snowblood and the Love Song of Vengeance, its sequel, which, if you
Woo!
want to get ahead of the program, they are either found on HBO or the Criterion channel. And then soon we will be doing a quick chat where we will be talking about the Oscars and our opinion on the Oscars and things like that. And that should be available either before or on Oscar date, Oscar Sunday. It's like
Oscar
It's not
Sunday.
Easter Sunday, it's Oscar Sunday.
This is our
Um,
Super Bowl, guys.
yeah, pretty much. And thank you always to our Patreons. So shout out to Sensei David, Homeboy James, Danny Boy, and our friend Ryan. Thank you guys so much for supporting us and hanging in there as we figure out a proper schedule and everything like
Yes, you
that.
guys are the best.
And yeah, so the next time you hear from us, we will be talking about Lady Snowblood and its sequel. Anything else you want to say, Savanna, before we sign off?
No, just thank you guys for, hanging in there. We appreciate it.
And almost 3 years doing Purple
Woo!
Noon.
We gotta celebrate. We gotta do something.
We
This
gotta do
April, we're
another
doing
photo shoot.
something. Oh, yeah, for sure. 100%.
But thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.